Contrary to what was initially expected based on Ferrari's tests with a full fuel load at the 4.259-kilometer circuit Zandvoort, many drivers opted to start the Formula One Dutch Grand Prix on the yellow Pirelli tires instead of the red ones. On this track, the two compounds exhibit different behaviors and lifespans. The choice of the hard compound is more conservative compared to the soft. Teams preferred this option to ensure a one-stop strategy and reach the finish line on Pirelli's hardest tires. Almost everyone, therefore, prepared for a medium, hard strategy, leaving open the possibility of a second stop to switch to a used red-banded compound. At the start, Max Verstappen overtook Lando Norris. The Dutchman did exactly what he needed to do to aim for victory. Once in the lead, the world champion was never able to impose a dominant pace, and McLaren patiently regained the position. In the early laps, the Dutchman tried to pull ahead but encountered a tough opponent understeer. His RB20, as he explained himself, wasn't turning properly. In the first sector, he did an excellent job, often managing to keep pace with Lando Norris, who was particularly strong in turns 1 and 3. The home champion had to be cautious with his left rear tire, which was slipping a bit too much. Later in the stint, when Lando Norris was about to attack him, Max Verstappen began to experience further understeer. The lack of rotation was widespread, but he particularly complained about the difficulty in turn 10, where he couldn't find grip with the medium tire. Charles Leclerc in the surprisingly positive Ferrari SF-24 maintained his pace during the first stint on mediums. He had to manage the tires a bit more in turn 7 and adjusted some settings during the stint to improve mid-corner rotation. Everything went according to plan by sticking to plan A. The Monegasque driver was among the first to pit, attempting an undercut on Oscar Piastri, who was just under a second ahead. The tire chosen for the second stint was, of course, the hard compound, aiming to reach the finish. The slightly early stop allowed him to gain a position, that of George Russell. The following lap, the Mercedes driver also pitted to switch to the hard tire. Oscar Piastri, on the other hand, delayed his pit stop considerably, knowing he wouldn't be able to exit ahead of Charles's Ferrari. He pitted on lap 34 to switch to the hard tire, but by then he had already lost positions to both Charles Leclerc and George Russell. The Australian was then forced to make overtakes on track, which benefited Charles Leclerc's race, as he was in third position at that time. On lap 28, Max Verstappen also pitted to switch to the hard tire. However, an undercut on Lando Norris was impossible, as there were more than 6 seconds between them. The following lap, Norris made his pit stop to switch, quite comfortably, to the harder tire. Charles Leclerc was dealing with some oversteer issues in turn 10, which they tried to address by adjusting various steering wheel settings. In general, his race engineer Brian Bozzi reminded him to keep his driving as clean as possible with his Ferrari. Red Bull informed Max that Lando was saving his tires more in turn 1 and, especially, in turn 7, one of the corners where the tire is most stressed. Around lap 50, Verstappen again complained about a lack of grip on the tires mounted on the left side of the car. On lap 55, Mercedes and George Russell surprised everyone by pitting to switch to the soft tire. Although many were considering this strategy, no one wanted to risk losing one or more positions without being certain of recovering them, considering that the Zandvoort Circuit doesn't offer many overtaking opportunities. During his stint on soft tires, the Englishman experienced quite a bit of understeer, identifying the lack of rotation as the main limitation. Lewis Hamilton also switched to soft tires in the final part of the race, even though he had started on mediums following a different strategy. Both were surprised by Ferrari's strength, as the German team expected to finish ahead of the red car by a significant margin, but the SF-24 delivered a performance far superior to expectations. Although it's always difficult to comment on such a performance in the heat of the moment, as Carlos Sainz explained after the race, it has to do with tire management. If you can get them to operate in their sweet spot, you gain a lot of grip. It's important to note that the track layout does not facilitate overtaking. Ferrari's strategists did an excellent job with Charles Leclerc, anticipating the stop and thus gaining positions over George Russell and Oscar Piastri. Without a significant performance difference, overtaking at the Zandvoort Circuit was difficult, which allowed the Monegasque to maintain his position more easily. Additionally, in terms of top speed, Carlos Sainz was the fastest, reaching a peak of 335 km per hour. Telemetry also showed that the Spaniard was consistently a few kilometers per hour faster at the braking point for the first corner. That said, Ferrari's performance in the Dutch Grand Prix cannot be underestimated, as they demonstrated excellent pace. Looking at the gap stats, we see that during the entire second stint on hard tires, Charles Leclerc managed to hold off Max Verstappen, maintaining second place and even clawing back sometime in the second half of the race against the reigning Red Bull world champion. On the eve of the race, it was unthinkable that the Ferrari could deliver such a performance in the Dutch Grand Prix. The setup chosen by Ferrari didn't work in the qualifying session, but in the race it made a huge difference. Beyond that, credit must be given to the Ferrari team for their tire management, and to the SF-24, which at least last Sunday in the race showed that the SF-24 is not a car to be dismissed entirely. The Dutch Grand Prix ends with Charles Leclerc crossing the finish line in third place, 3 seconds behind Max Verstappen, a well-deserved podium, beating McLaren. Carlos Sainz finishes in 5th place, recovering 5 positions and redeeming Saturday's poor performance. Good job, Ferrari. Team principal Frederic Vasseur, however, prefers to remain firmly grounded. The nearly 25-second gap to Lando Norris at Zandvoort is a clear indication of how much Ferrari still needs to work to try to close the gap to the current benchmark in Formula One and get back to competing for victories. The Italian side therefore left the Netherlands with an unexpected result. Zandvoort was supposed to be one of the most challenging tracks for the SF-24, perhaps the worst. However, in the race, the SF-24 single-seaters performed very well due to several factors, including excellent tire management, a good setup, a great pit strategy, and the near-perfect work of the drivers. This is where the result that left the Scuderia Ferrari team somewhat satisfied originated, but there's no time to rest, as the home race, the Italian Grand Prix at the Monza International Circuit, is just a few days away, and Ferrari arrives in front of the Tifosi as an ambitious team. The upcoming aerodynamic updates and the nature of the Italian track seem to be 2 perfect factors that should help to enhance the performance of the Maranello cars next weekend. The same goes for Baku and Singapore. In short, Ferrari has 3 crucial cards to play in defining its 2024 Formula One championship. For some time now, Ferrari has struggled in long corners. In fact, at the Zandvoort Circuit, the Maranello team encountered more than a few difficulties, especially in terms of fast runs in the qualifying session, which made things more difficult on Sunday. Now Monza, Baku, and Singapore should be more suited to the SF-24 cars entrusted to Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. At the same time, Ferrari technicians and engineers are ready to debut a package of updates in front of the prancing horses' home crowd. This should be a further step towards regaining the competitiveness that was lost in the early part of the summer and that, at least partially, was seen again at Zandvoort, but only on Sunday.